Welcome to the podcast where motherhood meets reinvention. I'm your host, Sharon Macey, and this is Mom to More. I'll be speaking with remarkable moms who have embraced the art of transformation, crafting their more by leveraging the skills they hone as stay-at-home moms. They'll share their experiences, struggles, and successes as they return to a former career, pursued a passion or hobby, or charted an entirely new path, giving you the clarity, motivation, and inspiration to help you answer the question, what do you want to do when your kids grow up? Welcome back, Pod Moms. So glad you're here. My guest today is Lea Porter. Prior to having a family, Lea had a multi-dimensional background as a corporate financial analyst at Xerox and TRW, as a real estate investor, and as a realtor. She holds a BBA from the University of Texas at Austin, my alma mater, and an MBA from Cal State, LA. Lea took a hiatus from the industry for many years to raise her family. After her kids had grown and flown, she boldly re-entered the industry of real estate in Q4 2021. She remains actively involved in many professional organizations, including Young Presidents Organization, otherwise known as YPO, Chief Executives Organization, American Israel Public Affairs Committee, and the Cedars-Sinai Board of Governors. In 2022, Lea had over $140 million in real estate sales and was featured in Los Angeles Business Journal's Top Realtors issue. And I got to tell you, this woman knows how to sell a property. Hey, Lea, it's so great to see you.
Thanks, Sharon.
I'm glad you're here. Thank you. Well, I'm going to start with my essential mom question that I ask all my moms, and that is, how many kids do you have and where did you raise them?
I have three children, Brandon, Bryce, and Corey. They're 24, 22, and 19, and I raised them in Los Angeles.
And how many years were you a stay-at-home mom?
I was a stay-at-home mom, I would say almost 18 years.
And that's a long time. I think that's something that a lot of women, I did it almost 20, and a lot of women, do that, make that commitment, right? To be with the kids and take a step back from their career. And actually, we realize also that it is a privilege to be able to be a stay-at-home mom. Definitely a privilege.
I think you just hit the nail on the head. I grew up as a latchkey kid, so I didn't have a stay-at-home mom. I had a mother who actually was working super long hours. She wasn't home when I came home. She, first of all, my parents are immigrants. I'm an immigrant. My children are first generation Americans. And so I grew up in Dallas, Texas, very Americana, watching all of my friends' mothers be the PTA moms, drive us places, always be home when, we would go to their house. And I realized how important that was. It didn't affect me in the sense that I understood my background. So I didn't resent anybody. It wasn't like my parents were off flying around the world and weren't there for me. They were actually working and trying to provide for us. But for me, I decided, I wanted to stay home and do everything that my parents couldn't do. And it is a privilege. It's a huge privilege to walk away from having to work and not think about it. It's kind of that double-edged sword, because when you're done doing that, what do you do?
Exactly. And let's also acknowledge that, yes, you have a very busy life now. You've always had a very busy life, but that, life is so busy as a stay-at-home mom because you are managing and organizing and driving three kids to three different places. But I think there's an important message to mom that talks about there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and there is time to recreate and reinvent. And we're going to definitely get into that a little more. And I think what you just said is trying to, seeing how you were raised and it was what it was, for all of us, and then making that decision and having the ability to make that decision to be home with the kids. So let's talk about some of the things that you did while you were home with the kids, because I know that everything that you did, it's going to resonate with all the moms listening.
I think the greatest skill I developed was being able, and at that time, we didn't have iPhones, we didn't have laptops,
Thank
we didn't,
God, right?
right? This is 2005.
Okay.
That was when I became really skilled at organizing, color coding, and being able to determine, like a pigeon, like a homing pigeon, how the distances in Los Angeles at different times of the sun setting, and if it's raining, and exactly traffic patterns, exactly how long it was going to take me to get through different parts of LA to get kids from one end to the other. And Los Angeles is one of those cities where you don't ask people how far something is, you ask them how long it's going to take you to get there.
Right. Right.
There's a very, very distinct difference with, oh, it's 1.5 miles. No, it's going to take you 20 minutes if you're going this way. And it could be a half a mile, but you just know it's going to take you 20 minutes. So
Right. And you have to factor that in. Yeah.
sometimes you can walk it faster than you could drive it.
Yeah. And you also mentioned color coding. And it sounds to me, I had the huge color coded calendar, and every kid had their own unique color. And it sounds like you did too, right?
Yeah, you
So you
had to
knew
have
who was
that.
supposed to do what, where, and when. You had a color code. Yeah.
Yeah, you had to color code because, if you have more than one child, then each child has a different schedule, no matter how hard you try to lump them in together to doing things. It's never going to be like that.
So let's talk about some of the other skills and superpowers that you developed as a mom. I mean, having known you for as long as I have, you have an amazing gift of gab and the ability to tell just a fabulous story, and keep everybody laughing while you're doing that. And was that something you did with your kids? Did your kids bring that out in you? Or have you always had just that fabulous personality?
So one of the things that I used to do to get my kids to do things is I would tell them if they didn't do it, rapper mommy was coming to their classroom and was going to do a rap for them.
Oh my God, no.
That kind of thing. So, no, it was fun. I enjoyed every minute of it. I did literally everything I could possibly do. And actually, I'll tell you a very funny story. So in our elementary school, we had something called Wednesday Worker. And at that time, there were sign-up sheets. You'd go to kindergarten, parents' night, and there'd be sign-up sheets on every table, and parents would go and they'd sign their name. Well, I'll make cookies on this day. And Wednesday Worker. And now we were new. I run over to Wednesday Worker and I see not one person signed up for Wednesday Worker. Well, isn't this my lucky day? So not only do
I'm going to do everything.
every single Wednesday, including for my husband, because I assumed Wednesday Worker was that you got to go sit in the classroom and be a worker on Wednesday. And I'm like, wow, I just scored the
That's what I'll do on Wednesdays. Yeah.
So I put Barry down for like 3/4 of the Wednesdays, and I took a couple. And then I came home and I said, oh my gosh, good news, sweetie. I've got you every Wednesday going into Brandon's classroom. You're going to sit there. You're just going to watch them. You're going to help out. So just calendar yourself out. So the first Wednesday I go there, this is my Wednesday, and I get put into a conference room by myself, and I have to cut out like 3,000 bones of construction paper to make Mr. Bones. They're all going to hang for Halloween.
Oh no.
It's unbelievable for hours there. And then I
Not
thought
the work you thought you were going to be doing.
I thought I was going to see the kids. And so I realized why nobody signs up for Wednesday Worker, aside from like washing all the towels, taking everything. I mean, you literally are just the labor of the class on Wednesday. So then I had to take Barry off every single Wednesday, and I had to do every single Wednesday. So you become very well versed in taking direction, getting it done, and trying to get it done as quickly as possible, because you don't want to be stuck in that conference room all day, you know.
Right.
I
So
learned
word to the wise about signing up for everything.
everything. Like, how lucky did I get? So you learned how to read a room really quickly.
That's true. That's true. And you also know how to read your kids like in an instant.
Yeah.
That is really true. So let's talk about, when did you start to think about what you wanted to do when your kids grew up? Was this something that was sort of brewing for a while, or did you just wake up one day and just say, it's time? And what did that sort of, what was going on in your mind? What did that mind transition look like?
So I think the mind transition kind of really happened a little bit previous to COVID, but really hit home at COVID because, honestly, I didn't, after 18 years of not working and not being in real estate,
Mhm.
I left let's say, a very successful, profitable career because I had established 20 years of business managers, lawyers. My clientele
Mhm.
was not putting a sign out in front of an open house and waiting for random people to walk in. I mean, I literally had cultivated lawyers, business managers, talent agents, a stable professionals who would give
Mhm.
me their clients. So
Right.
that was really because of my financial background, that was just the natural order for me and for my clientele. So I guess I didn't really appreciate how I had cultivated all that. And I might have taken it for granted because at that point, 18 years later, you have to remember, I was very young when I started in the business. I was already, in my early 20s. They're already in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And 20 years later, they have either retired, moved on, cultivated other relationships over 20 years.
Mhm.
Clients of mine that normally I would have rebought them houses, sold them houses, gotten their children, aunts, uncles, they've all
Mhm.
cultivated other relationships. My
Right.
industry is a relationship industry. So I never really thought I could actually easily go back to work. I thought, I don't even know how to start. So around COVID, when life stopped for everybody, and it was great. I had my kids home. So that was wonderful. But then as you're coming out of COVID and your kids are going back to college, and I had
Mhm.
two at the time, and then Corey, she hit the ground as a senior running because her 11th grade year was all COVID. So, I mean, senior year, that kid was gone. So all of a sudden I was an empty nester before I was an empty nester.
Right. You had a preview, empty nest year.
I had a big preview into, oh, wow, it's back to having 5-year-olds because my house is full of kids and they can't go anywhere, to,
Right.
wow, what just happened? I'm an empty nester without being an empty nester
Mhm.
because I still have one child at home who we never saw, and I was happy that Corey was out and about. So I didn't really know what I was going to do. And I would have these conversations with one of my close friends who was an ER nurse. She did the same thing.
Mhm.
She and I started JTD kindergarten together. She gave up being an ER nurse. And granted, for her, going back to being an ER nurse 20 years later,
The
that's
world has changed. Well, and
world.
also I think whether it's real estate or medicine or marketing, there's a re-ramp up, right, of your skill set. And so
Well,
did you go back to school for that?
no, so it's very funny. When I went back to work, one of the things Barry, my husband, says to me is, hey, don't forget your Thomas Guide and pager. Well, for those of you that don't know, Thomas Guide was the quintessential map app
Yeah.
that was what we all drove around in. And it was this spiral notebook, right? And you go to the back and
Mhm.
look at a street and it would say, page 562D4. You would flip to 562, you'd go, I think it's ABCD and 1, 2, 3, 4, and you'd go down and you'd find the box with the street name, and then you'd figure out how to get there. So, and my kids are horrified when I tell them this. So, and a pager, we had
It's sort of one of those back in the day sort of comments. sort of situations back in the day, right?
And then you end up memorizing your Thomas Guide, the different pages. So I was very skilled at getting around Los Angeles very quickly and very effectively. But now there's no Thomas Guide, there are no pagers. Everything is on your phone and everything is text. Nobody wants to talk. And, the other game changer for me was Zillow, Redfin, social media, all of a sudden.
Yeah, that's a whole new world. Absolutely.
You know,
So there was a ramp up, right? You had to ramp up in terms of really understanding the social media, and all of a sudden you had a website, and a lot of things changed over those 18 years that you had to sort of get your skill set, like get it up to speed.
it's like being Rip Van Winkle. I mean, yeah, sure. Did I have an Instagram? Sure. Did I have a Facebook? Sure. Did
Right.
I post? Yeah, I would post my cat. I mean, this is the whole
Yeah.
memes, yeah, funny things, but definitely not for distribution to the public. It's,
Exactly.
my 150 close friends, and everything was a private account. And all of a sudden there are celebrity realtors, which, all the reality shows of real estate, it just became a different game. And syndication of Zillow and Redfin all of a sudden put all the real estate information into clients' hands. So the good and the bad of it is we used to be the gatekeepers. You didn't know anything. What did that house down the street sell for? I need to call my broker. Or what is available in the market? I don't know. That house doesn't have a sign in front of it. I didn't know it was for sale. There were so many, we were the stopgap for everybody. You would have to like pretty much hit the gate, and we would open the gate and give you all this information. Now, all of a sudden, clients are telling me things that I didn't know.
Right. Like, okay, which makes sense. And again, I think that's part of your, your reinvention, right? There is a new ramp up of material and technology that just didn't exist when you were in it, 18 years prior.
I was going to say the learning curve was steep.
I'm sure. So talk about, were there any struggles or insecurities that you had? Because all of a sudden now you're looking at social media and websites. And so talk about, in your return to the real estate world, some of the struggles that you had to overcome, or some of the insecurities that you personally had about re-entering that industry.
Sure. So part of it was DocuSign, doing everything digitally. I remember grabbing multi-pages of contracts that I would run to a client and sit there and go through it page by page, initial page by page, give them their copy, take my copy. Now everything is DocuSign. So I think look, I was very lucky because I fell back into the business very quickly. I decided that I was helping one girlfriend. I didn't even belong to a company. I have my own broker's license, and I've had a broker's license since 1984. When I was in grad school, I ended up getting a California broker's license because I always wanted to be in real estate, but my circuitous route to get there was based on my educational background. So, my very first sale was $27 million. And
tiny, just kidding. That's extraordinary. That's really incredible.
It was
and again, you're in LA, so that makes sense.
I'm in Los Angeles.
That's huge.
It's a huge deal regardless, right? Even in LA. And I didn't even write the contract. I had to have the other broker's assistant write the contract because I didn't have DocuSign. I didn't even know how to do those contracts because they're very different. The contract has many iterations since, I was in the business, and was kind of relearning how to negotiate a deal for my friend. And at that point, it just kind of spiraled. Then all of a sudden, somebody else called me. I was just chatting with a friend of mine. I said, well, I went back to work. I'm back in real estate. And she said, I want to sell my house, but I'm not going to give you the listing. I said, can I interview for it?
That's
And she
interesting.
said, yeah, well, part of, and I think you may find this to be true of all the moms who re-enter the workforce or try to amp up a new business or a startup or whatever it is that they have a passion about, is you're perceived as a dilettante. Oh, it's your hobby.
Explain.
It's your hobby until you decide to not do it anymore. Oh, you didn't work for 18 years, but now you've decided to do this. You're perceived as a dilettante. And
you know what that sort of annoys me is that while you're home with the kids, you are managing and overseeing and organizing and communicating and problem solving and creating events and parties and whatever. There's a rich skill set and superpowers that we all possess as moms that you don't even think you have. And then all of a sudden you realize, wow, I have a wealth of skills within me. And you're just starting to realize it years later.
Well, and it's kind of really interesting you say that, because it is true. The amount of multitasking, and by the way, it's not just kids. You are running the house, you are getting cars repaired, you are making travel arrangements, you are packing everybody, you are unpacking everybody, you are managing and oh my God, and you have to go out of town. It's a village at that point.
It is.
It's, I remember being in Paris and being awake at 3 a.m. to make sure that Brandon was picked up, delivered to where he needed to go.
Oh my gosh.
You know what I mean? Like, he had one of these crazy days, and it's 3 a.m, buried dead to the world. Dead to the world. not a care in the world.
And don't you think this is interesting when dad has to leave town on business, he just packs up and goes. If mom has to leave town for any reason, there's the schedules for whoever's like there with the kids, and this person has to be here, and this is when school starts. And it's a massive organization effort.
Today, moms are super young moms with young kids, or moms with young kids, I should say, because I wasn't such a young mom with young kids. But I have on my phone Life 360, which is a tracking device that 2 of my kids let me have. My oldest one refuses, and I also have it on my parents, and I have it on my husband. And it's an unbelievable app that allows you to see where everybody is and where they have been, how long it took them to get there, how fast the car is that they were driving in as a passenger.
Especially important for kids. Yeah, we had that when our kids were younger, but no more.
By the way, it's great. I have it on my parents. I know where my parents are.
That's important. Yeah, because your parents are older, and I think that's really important.
My dad is 92. My mom is 85. I have it on both their phones, so I always know where they are. And but back when my kids were young, there's no tracking device, and so that was huge. The multitasking and running the show. You're a showrunner.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a good point. And I think it's important for other moms to know is that all of these skills are incredibly viable and marketable. And you take all of these things you learn while you are, as I like to say in air quotes, just home with the kids, anything but, and they're so viable.
Yeah.
That's such a joke. I know. You're exhausted. You never sit down. You fall asleep when everybody else is asleep, and you wake up before they wake up, or unless they wake you up at 4 a.m. and they're throwing up by the side of your bed or something like that. But there are, I think moms forget, because I remember thinking to myself, wow, I've lost my skill set. What am I going to do, when my kids grow up? And you realize, okay, those of us do have to go back to school sometimes. I went back and took a course, and you still had a ramp up, because your industry had so changed. It was all digital now. There was a whole social media aspect, and you had it. That's how you got the word out about a property that you're listing or something that just sold, or here's an open house. And there's a huge, ramp up both ways. And I think the message to moms, what I'm hearing from you, and also, excuse me, from my experiences, don't be afraid. Just do it.
Well,
Right?
you know what, I think
Talk about that.
yeah, I think that is exactly, you hit the nail on the head. I remember thinking, kind of coming out of COVID, and I'd been thinking about doing something, going back to work. Like I really wanted to go back to work, and what exactly did that look like? I honestly didn't think I could go back to real estate because I just felt like I had lost every single relationship. And again, being perceived as a dilettante, and close friends not wanting to give you listings, not wanting to effectively help you, which was kind of probably the biggest surprise I had was, and still do, you build these friendships and these relationships, and you kind of think you can rely on that as well, at least I have these friends, and I have these relationships. And then what you find is that you actually really don't. And again, I think it goes back to the perceived as a dilettante. Well, you stayed home for 18 years. You didn't work for 18 years.
Right.
The guy down the street has been selling real estate for the last 18 years. You haven't. So, but the funny thing is I've done better in 2 years, which will be close to $300 million than the guy down the street.
Which is extraordinary. Let's just take a moment and just, acknowledge that, for coming back, after all those years home with the kids, Lea, that's extraordinary. So I applaud you, mom to mom. I applaud you for that, because that's really incredible.
I have become mom,
therapist,
literally car chauffeur, problem solver, everything that my 3 kids needed, I am now doing for these giant clients.
That would sort of lead me into my next question is, as moms, their kids are getting older and they've got a little more, air in their day, a little more daylight in their schedule. Advice that you would have as women start to think about their what's next, knowing that they have this rich skill set, that you've just identified so many skills that moms do have. It might be a really good time for introspection, thinking, okay, what am I really good at, and where can I take that next?
Well, I think for me, I thought about it quite a bit, and I did the philanthropy thing for a while, and I loved it, but I didn't feel as if I was contributing enough. There's philanthropy, and then there's working philanthropy. And I felt like I could never quite get into the working philanthropy. I was always on the social philanthropy. And the social philanthropy, while lots of fun, is never kind of gave me the satisfaction of accomplishment, I guess you could say. I never had the feeling of accomplishment. But there's a lot of women that fills a void for them. And I loved it. And I did it for multiple of years. And don't get me wrong, I still write those checks. I just don't really have time anymore for the social philanthropy unless it was a working philanthropy. So I think for me, what I needed a sense of accomplishment. I needed to start something, nurture it, and take it to the end. And then start something else, nurture it, and take it to the end. And I think for anybody who's looking to get back into the business, I often say this to my children: success is not measured in money. Success is actually measured in your own happiness. And so what I never wanted my children to do was pursue something because it was going to pay well, or it was going to be a big bang for the buck at the end. because I can't tell you how many people despise what they do in life, but have those golden handcuffs and
That's true.
have to do it because the paycheck is too great. It's too late to make a move. So for me, I kept thinking, what is it that excites me, makes me happy, that I am happy to work 80-hour weeks doing
Mhm.
because it's exciting and I love it. So it's anything. It could be a passion. I mean, I have one girlfriend who, after probably the same amount of years, 20 years, 18 years of not working, being a stay-at-home mom, you know what her passion was? Her passion was knitting.
Oh,
And
I love that.
yeah,
Okay.
no, it's fantastic. And I was having coffee with her, and she was telling me that she had been creating this knitted poncho, and that she was flying to India, and she had found a vendor, and they were beautiful, and they were hand knit, and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, that's a passion that she took and created a
Hmm.
business, you know, and
100%. 100%. And you know what's really interesting about that, Leah, is one of the things that I talk about is that as a mom, you have a choice, right? You could, if you want to go back to work, if you don't, that's totally cool too. But if you want, re-enter the industry that you were in, which you did, pursue a passion or a hobby, something that really floats your boat, like this woman did with the knitting and now creating a business out of it, or charting an entirely new path. Those are all incredibly viable. And it just depends what you want to do, like what speaks to you as a human being.
well, that's the key, you know. Is it painting? Is it, I mean, it's something as silly as knitting.
It's
I mean,
all yeah.
and by the way,
Hmm.
not that knitting is silly, but I'm saying that other people might think is just literally a pastime. So many pastimes have turned into careers. Well, you know, what's that?
Absolutely.
Necessity is the mother of invention, right?
Mother. Hmm.
So how
Yep.
many things, how many reinventions of the same wheel have we women have
Right.
done? And you're right. I mean, it is true. You as a stay-at-home mom, you do think sometimes that you gave up a lot in terms of your own growth until you go back and you
True.
look at, first of all, I wouldn't trade a minute of, you know, the 18 years. And
Same.
you're right,
Yeah.
it was
Same.
a massive privilege, a massive privilege. My gratitude to my husband and the universe that I was able to do that is beyond,
Yeah.
it's infinite. Because I didn't have that. And my mom wasn't able to be a stay-at-home mom. She had to work, and she worked long hours.
Right.
So, but you're right. The skill set that you get from that, the patience, the ability to negotiate with a 4-year-old, those negotiating skills have served me unbelievably well. And I'll give you an example. You know, when you
Okay.
have your child 4 years old, 6 years old, and you need to negotiate, and they are stomping their foot and they are not going to get to yes. And what
Hmm.
do? You slow your speaking, you take it down a notch, you
Hmm.
learn how to quietly, rather, because if you're going to go toe to toe with a 4-year-old, you're going to lose.
You're gonna lose.
You're
You're
going
gonna lose.
to give it up, leave the room,
Yeah.
you're going
Yeah.
to lose.
Yeah. Lights out. Yeah. Forget it. So
Yeah.
since we've been talking about reinvention and your next act, I have a question for you that I ask all my moms. And since this is the Mom to More podcast, Lea Porter, what is your more?
Well, that's actually a really good question, because I did think about that. You know, now I've been back to work full time 2 years.
Hmm.
Actually, 2-year anniversary was in September. And I realized that one of my skill sets that I bring from 18 years of being a stay-at-home mom and being in the school system and is disseminating information. And so California has been having a tremendous amount of upheaval between our mansion tax, which is
Hmm.
currently being challenged in court, insurance. All the national carriers have left California, so now you can't get fire
Right.
insurance. We've got this new wildlife ordinance that is happening, which is affecting developments, affecting homeowners in a giant swath of Los Angeles. And what I started doing was I started actually sending this information. You'd be surprised how little information is disseminated to homeowners or to people who just don't seem to understand it, haven't really looked at it, not giving it much thought. And so I've decided that what I'm going to start doing is more of an informative kind of a newsletter. So right now, every agent's newsletter seems to be, here's the greatest restaurants, here's here's what's happening in LA, and here's my new listing, that kind of thing. And yes, while I was doing that as well, I decided that, my background is much more about disseminating really important information. And I realized that the information that I did send out, other agents were contacting me and saying, hey, when are you sending out a recap of what's happening with ULA? And I was like, wait, you're a real estate broker. Like you're asking me. So I realized that that's my more. Now I'm going to bring that teaching skill that I did for 18 years and bring that to the table. Because how didn't we all become homeschoolers?
We did. And I love how you really brought it full circle. We've had this whole circle of life that's talked about, from when the kids are younger and all the skills that you developed over the 18 years and how you are using them again, just with different characters. And I think that's a really important message to moms, is that look deep, right? Really look at what you have done with the kids that sometimes you just blow off. And then you sort of go back and you think about it years later and you realize, I have developed these skills and now I'm able to use them, in whatever industry that I choose to go into, or passion that I choose to do, or new business that I want to start. So Lea, tell me where my listeners can find you online.
You can find me on Instagram at Lea_Porter. You can Google my name, Lea Porter, real estate agent, Los Angeles. I'll pop up. You can find me at the Beverly Hills Estates in Los Angeles, and you can find me on Facebook.
Terrific. And all of this information will be in the show notes. So everyone will be able to contact Lea if they want. And as always, folks, you can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Mom to More. And thank you, Lea. This has just been so much fun. And I'm so glad we got to spend this time together. And I'm just appreciative of your friendship and of this wonderful interview. So I'm really grateful to you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It was a lot of fun.
I'd like to give a special shout out to Wanda for her 5-star rating and review. Wanda said, I loved the Hunger Heroes episode. For many years, I taught at a school where food insecurity was a prevailing problem, especially come Monday morning after a weekend without much to eat. I am thrilled to hear about Filling in the Blanks and the supportive community they've built. I'm now a supporter. Thank you for highlighting their work. Well, Wanda, I am so grateful for your kind words. And on behalf of Filling in the Blanks, I thank you for your support. And for listeners, that was the July episode. Before I sign off, a quick favor. I would love it if you would take a few moments to follow or subscribe to the pod. Following us means you'll never miss an episode, and it really does help the show to grow. Just go to the Mom to More show page on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen in. Tap the plus sign in the upper right corner or click on follow. While you're there, if you'd be willing to leave a 5-star rating and review and share an episode with another mom, I'd be so grateful and appreciate your support. Thanks for listening in, and see you next time.